Welcome, Joe. You need to
Hello.
unmute yourself.
Excellent start. Thank you very much, Alex. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the June edition of Astrato Live. You'll notice we're missing a face. Martin Mailer, our founder and CEO, is held up in New York. So, as a super substitute, we've got both Alex and Piers, and the content will continue at a high quality. Regardless. So really good set of content for us to work through today. We are live, so throughout the session, please throw any questions you have into the chat and we'll pick up as many of those as we can or hold them to the end, up to you entirely. We're going to touch on a few topics. We're going to talk a little bit about the Snowflake Summit recently and where we see Astrato fitting in around some of the announcements there. We're going to touch a little bit for maybe people who haven't worked with it or seen too much of Astrato yet about how we're different. And then we're going to play that through in some of the product updates on what we've been working on during the last month and what's coming up in the next few weeks from the Astrato side as well. So with that, let's get into it. So during June, a number of us represented Astrato at the Snowflake Summit over in Las Vegas. I think for most of us, it's the first mass participation event we've attended, certainly in the last couple of years, given COVID. So almost 10,000 people in attendance, really successful event, I think, for Snowflake, but also very much for Astrato as well. And you could argue the event went viral, but for slightly the wrong reasons, in that we did have rather a number of positive tests coming back out of the event. But regardless, great to be there in person. So in terms of what we saw there and what we think is really interesting, some big announcements, of course, from Snowflake, that their features notably supportive things like Python and being able to leverage new capabilities in Snowflake to be the backend for data apps. And that's something that we really see lines up well with write-back capabilities in Astrato as well. So two really big things that we saw. Lots of other stuff as well, but in terms of what's focused on us, those are key things we spotted. And I think we also saw like a lot of kind of curiosity really around as companies are going through different levels of maturity and moving to cloud. They see that as an opportunity to evaluate the tools they're using across that spectrum, whether it's moving, cataloging, storing data, but also tools for analytics and machine learning. So lots and lots of partners. And that for us kept us really busy with people looking at Astrato and us sharing how we think we can help solve some of those problems. So lots of stuff happened. And I think one of the things that we definitely came out the event winning on was Astrato giveaways. I think our swag for the event was very strong. We gave away a lot of stuff. I think it was very much in demand. So again, lots of interest for us, really interesting. And I think in terms of what we saw from the kind of conversations we had with customers, I think we saw a lot of people really seeing really that kind of demand for getting value out of Snowflake as quickly as possible. So how do you do that at speed? How do you kind of change some of the analytics approaches with other tools? And how do we fit in with that? So we spent a lot of time talking to customers about that. And I think one of the topics when we had the most is like, how are you different? Like, how are you different to the other vendors that are out there today? So we'll touch on that in a little while. Just to give a very quick run through on that, we won't make it too salesy, but we'll talk a little bit about where we think we're different. But maybe first of all, let's throw it over to Piers and Alex. What did you take away from the conference? What was your kind of highlight that you found?
So for me, the Snowpark expansion with Python UDFs, the user-defined functions, that's something that I'm really interested in, and I'll be collaborating with Snowflake's data scientists on. That's very exciting. Being able to bring the data science in, and there's more to Python than just data science. So very interesting space.
Awesome, yeah. And I think we saw some great opportunities for how we can surface that in our front end of the Astrato product. So continue that theme of being a low-code solution when you're consuming it, but again, being able to leverage the power of what's running in that warehouse underneath. So yeah, really interesting stuff. What about you, Alex?
I think the security aspect was something that like really popped out for me, and I thought it was quite interesting. So like been in the BI space for quite a long time, right? I still remember the good old days when you booted up a server and configured an ODBC connection, and everything was just fine and dandy, right? But now when you have kind of like your cloud software sitting up there, hosting all of your data with all of your different users, the expectation that you just kind of like are able to pass through user identities between different systems is almost, I would say, these days is almost like a given, like you expect it out of every software, right? And I thought that was quite interesting from Snowflake as well, especially with some of the announcements they launched around better kind of management around data masking and role policies and so on and so forth. That we're also able to support that out of the box. That I thought was quite interesting. But just the fact that we shifted our mindset that you walk up to any vendor today and having if you don't have pass-through auth, what are you even doing? Right? I thought that was quite interesting.
Awesome, great. So really interesting event. It certainly validated a lot of our ideas and kind of gave us some inspiration for many new things to come as well. So really excited to see how we follow up on other events with Snowflake throughout this year. So next topic we wanted to talk about, as I mentioned during the event, as a relatively new vendor in the space, we get asked this question a lot. It's like, how is Astrato different ... to whatever BI tool that you're currently using today? And so we thought we'd kind of touch on that briefly during this call. I don't want to make it a big sales pitch, but I wanted to highlight some of the key areas that we see and against a couple of the bigger vendors out there. So if we look at kind of the overall landscape, if you kind of think of two kind of planes to kind of consider about whether they're more kind of a traditional focus, maybe more in memory or an extract BI tool at one end, through to cloud native live query at the other. We see ourselves, of course, right at that end of cloud native and live query. That's kind of where we're positioning ourselves, as are a number of other vendors as well. And then there's also then vendors that are aiming for more niche, very specific use cases with particular user audiences, or those that are going mass market. And we're very firmly kind of positioning ourselves in that top right corner where we want to provide the capabilities for you to use cloud native live query BI that have lots of flexibility about the use cases you can solve with it. Whether that's more of a straightforward dashboarding, whether it's data exploration, whether it's ease of use and self-service, that's really where we're positioning ourselves to make our products sing. And so where we then look at in terms of maybe some of the more specifics, we're going to pick just three vendors just to kind of do a comparison. So first of all, let's go with Tableau. How would I say we're different to Tableau specifically? So with thank you, Alex. With Tableau specifically, I think there's five kind of key things that probably jump out. So we talk a lot about being 100% cloud native live query. That for us means that you should be able to do everything in the product from your web browser without downloading any software and run that product directly against your data warehouse without needing to move your data. We think that's really important. And for us, that gives you extra control, extra governance, and extra scale, because you don't need to take your data to a local machine, to an external server, and have to apply additional governance and security on top of that. So that's kind of a key attribute for us. We also are very tightly integrated with Snowflake. We saw a lot of real interest from customers about how we've integrated with things like time travel natively in the product. Lots of interest from customers there, and Piers is going to touch on that later. In terms of, if you go back one, Alex just skipped ahead. So in terms of the other attributes, we talk about no specialist knowledge, and this is really because you don't need to take the data out, you don't need to do any extra data modeling. It means that the barrier for entry is really low for your users, and it means you can be really fast. So whether it's for your more skilled user or for a business user, we provide those capabilities. And the final two, as we've talked about previously on these calls, we add write-back capabilities natively into our product as well, which means you can start building data apps rather than just dashboards. Specifically against Tableau, we have really attractive pricing as well. And if we then take a look at something like Power BI, actually the differences are pretty much the same. We have the same strengths there, but we also would say, we're not a Microsoft product. And for some companies, that's a real, a big thing, but for others less so. And I think, we're very focused on being a very agile tool and continuing to invest there as well. And then finally, if we take a look against one of those vendors who is already, you would say, is a cloud native live query analytics tool like Looker, then slightly different use cases. Again, we're aiming for a very wide range of analytics use cases. So kind of the dashboards that you could build and the quality and feature richness of those dashboards is very high in Astrato compared to something like Looker. Again, we're made for business users, not just data scientists. So tools like Looker require you to write quite a lot of kind of coding, the LookML language that they have up front to be able to start working with data. And again, right back, but also is a key element for us, as is continuous investment in our use cases. Looker being part of Google, they're taking a slightly different path going forward. So again, we're continuing to invest all of our resources in focusing on our key use cases. Okay, so very quick run through. If you want to get more information about how we see we're different and also take a much closer look at the product, please reach out to us. We'll definitely be able to follow up with more information tailored to your specific needs as well. So we'll move on now to product updates. So we want to spend a lot of time here looking at what we've been working on over the last month or so, and then a little sneak peek of what we're working on that we'll be releasing during the month of July. So Piers is going to kick us off here with some looks at coloring and filters and much, much more. So over to you, Piers.
Thanks, Joe. So first up, we have custom color palettes and conditional coloring. So what I have open at the moment is one of our workbooks in the workbook editor mode. It's looking at people analytics and feedback. So it's a HR data set. This is actually one of our write back use cases, but let's focus on coloring for this example. You can see these two bar charts here. There's a clear color scheme going on, but the way that we're using color to communicate things is what we're here to talk about. It's a little bit more unique. You can see this reference line here, the black line separating the blue from the orange. The reference line has been added to highlight that the average is 120. Anything above that is in blue. Anything below is in this light amber orange. And to achieve that, we're down here in the property panel in the style section, conditional coloring. And I've added a measure rule. So if the average tenure is greater than or equal to less than or equal to 120, then show it in the amber color. So more rules can be applied. You can see that we have different types of rules in there. We can also add dimension rules as well. So if I said I wanted to have design in green, it's as simple as that. Moving over to the other bar chart here, what I've done here is I have set a custom color palette. I've done that so I can code in a sequence of colors and display them in the chart. Of course, this works for any much larger charts. But I think there's a limit of, well, of course, you should only use up to about 13 colors. Recommended probably about 8 to 11 colors. You can drag and drop these colors, of course, like so. And if I wanted to add another one and change that, as simple as that. That's my custom color palette and our conditional coloring as well. So over to the next example, in-chart filtering. So I can click on any of these points here. I've just clicked into the rose diagram, the donut chart, and able to apply the filter in the filter bar at the top. I can click here to remove that, or I can remove all. And I can do the same thing in the bar chart. Now this is a much easier experience than having filters scattered around the workbook, making it cluttered. However, I do have this filter on the left-hand side, which does include the measure value, which comes with a progress bar as well. So what I'm going to do here, I've got quick select on. So I've just clicked on the game at the top, and if I hold down Shift and select, I'll do that once more. There we go. I've selected 3 of those. And you can see how fast that is as well. That's one of the benefits of using Snowflake. It's just a click and go, and we've got an update. So that's in-chart filtering and how that works with the filter bar. Now where it gets really interesting is time travel. So this is our sales in CRM demo. What I'm going to do here is I've clicked on the time travel icon. I go back 21 days. Now I'm going to focus on this number here, the ARR from the current month. So this is actually a version of our own data, of course, anonymized. And what we're going to do is we're looking at that 502,000 ARR. We're going to go back 21 days and see what that figure was 21 days ago. Now, of course, we're a SaaS business, so subscriptions, we would rely on a snapshot to find out that number. Going back with time travel makes this easier. We don't have to record snapshots. We don't have to do other queries like you would have to do in other BI products. We're leveraging that feature from Snowflake so we can go back in time nice and easy. And now I can tell you what that number is going to be. What that number is 150K. So within 21 days, this dummy business has generated $350,000 of ARR. And I've been able to answer that business question solely down to time travel.
So this is probably one of my my favorites, right, Piers? Because I've been through many QBRs, different sales meetings, right? And you keep going like, why did your pipeline change? And it was sitting in with the salespeople, and they always go, I messed around with the numbers. Now you can actually just dial back and say, well, 2 days ago this was your reality, right? But 3 days ago this was your reality. So you can actually just play back the history in time almost, and really get more efficient sales meetings and QBRs going, which is really, really interesting. So yeah, kudos, good stuff, Piers.
Thank you. We can even go back 1.5 days, and it's nice and fast. So last of all, I'm in the same workbook. I'm going back to the workbook editor so I can show you measure filters. So we're actually looking at the same filter here, same measure, and we're changing the filters. So I have the measure for 1 expected to win, and the reason why they look different is credited to measure filters. So there's a lot of value in being able to compare the same measure split by different things. So I might want to look at sales for the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days. I can do that with measure filters, but in this example, what I've done is I've taken the revenue and said close this month. This is the revenue logged in a CRM system, so it's already closed or expected to win. So I've used the flags that are stored in Snowflake to filter this down. So what that lets me do here is I know that this here, what I'm hovering over, is 444,000 expected to win, 502 already closed this month, as we saw in the time travel example. So I'm able to filter my data within the chart, within the measure as well. So lots of different ways to slice and dice and get value out of your data. And that concludes my my product updates.
Awesome, Piers. That looked really good. So what about if you want to compare stuff, things like this month versus previous month, or these kind of things? Can you achieve that with measure filters as well?
Yes, that's possible. What we're going to do in future, that's coming in maybe a little bit early to say exactly when that's coming, but things like last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, month to date, year to date, between periods, things like that, it's going to get much, much easier. Of course, we're a no-code tool. You don't have to fiddle with dates all the time or -7. It should be as easy as click in here, you do -7 in a couple of sliders, and this sort of experience will come into the properties panel to make that nice and smooth.
Very cool.
So
Very cool.
we're listening to that customer feedback.
Awesome. So I think we can move on a little bit here in the program as well. And I should say already now that sorry in advance because I'm in a very, very tiny room here, and there's no AC, and we currently have a very heat wave going on in Sweden. So as the stream kind of goes on, I will keep kind of taking off pieces of clothing, as I'm already down to t-shirt here. So this might turn into a completely different stream. You never know. But I basically have a few different things that I wanted to show you today. So not this infinite, very cool canvas, but I'll cover off a few different things. We'll look at Snowflake authentication. We'll look at theming inside of the lobby. And then finally, we'll look at embeds that's gotten like a big facelift, right? In addition to that, we're also shipping, just tinier updates to the lobby, for example. So it just feels a little bit tighter. It feels a bit nicer. We're reusing, the real estate a little bit better, and so on and so forth. But I'll start with the white labeling, or the appearance, as we call it. So nowadays, if you're a administrator or an owner of your Astrato tenant, you can come in here, you can click on administration down on the left-hand side, and you can now find system settings. You can come in here, and now this allows you to actually skin the lobby so it matches even your corporate colors, so it feels a little bit more homey in that sense. We're all struggling with adoption when it comes to BI projects, so the idea here being that if you can make at least the landing pages and where your users enter into the tool a little bit more familiar, it feels a little bit more like their own tool. You get a little bit more emotionally attached to it. So as part of the first release of this, you can either pick and choose some predefined themes if you wanted to go with some weird ass summer color here. I actually very much like the river one, which is the one I use all the time. But if you wanted to, you can of course come in and roll your own, which is totally fine as well. And you get to set primary, secondary colors, if the font should be light or dark. So I'm not a designer, but maybe you go some very strange green, and maybe you'll pair that with some nice yellow as a secondary color. And you can also upload your own logos if you wanted to do that as well. So that is available now as well. So you can skin the lobby to make it feel a little bit more like your own. And once you got sick of this horrible color scheme, you can always just go back to classic again. And this, if you said it applies to all users, we might be looking into if you wanted to have user-specific themes as well. But for now, it's one theme per tenant. So as you enable it, it's then available for all users. They don't have to do anything special. So that was lobby theming, very short and to the point. The other feature that we shipped, which is a little bit bigger, is the ability to have pass-through authentication. So initially, we had what we called pass-through authentication for Okta. So you could set up your login authentication to Okta, and if you then also used Okta on Snowflake, you could seamlessly just get access to Snowflake. So you just signed into Astrato using your Okta credentials. Those were then passed on downwards towards Snowflake, and you automatically got access to Snowflake. In addition to that, we've now also shipped the ability to have what we call access integrations. So these are slightly different from login integrations. So they don't allow you to log into Astrato, but you can connect these to other places, such as Snowflake, for example. So in this case, we already have a connection enabled for this tenant. It is quite simple. It's not that hard. We'll provide some sample scripts for you as well. So popping over to Snowflake, you can come in here. You can run something like this to create an OAuth connection. Now, everybody, don't look at my secrets, but they're there. And from here on out, we can, get my client ID and my secrets. I can come back into Snowflake, into Astrato, and I can define my connection here. So it's quite simple. You go new integration, you pick up Snowflake, you give it a name, you give it an URL, which is your Snowflake domain or your Snowflake URL. You point to a client ID and the client secret that you just generated inside of Snowflake. You hit create, boom, you're done. And now what happens is when you come in and click on something like data, and you decide to create a new data source, from here on out, you can pick and choose, for example, Snowflake. What you'll have now is, if you have OAuth enabled, this will automatically show up, and it will now have all of the different issuers or account URLs that I have configured. If you wanted to, you can, of course, go back to the old way of using service accounts, which can be useful for certain scenarios, such as if you have big screen TVs or things like that, where you don't want to time people out, for example. But we'll switch back to OAuth. I can come in and click test connection. What's happening now is that it's actually checking if I have authenticated to Snowflake, which I, in my case, already have. Otherwise, you would be routed to Snowflake to sign in using your own credentials. And now I'm in. I automatically just got access to Snowflake. There's no username and passwords. There's nothing to remember. I can now establish a data connection that is using OAuth. And the benefit of this is that your users down the line as well, when they open up the dashboard, they will then be prompted for signing into Snowflake if they don't, if they haven't done it before. If they haven't done it, if they have already done it inside of Astrato, then we'll of course cache those credentials, depending on how much you allow us to cache them for. So up to a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever you feel comfortable with. And this is basically it. And what this really allows us to do as well, which we talked about previously as well, is the ability that we can leverage inside of Snowflake things like row-level security, data masking. So because we're now firing the queries as that user and no longer as a service account, that means we can then automatically in runtime kind of reduce the data sets based on your own access policies that you might have in Snowflake. You only get unmasked data if you have the correct privileges and so on and so forth. So this really enables us to have data masking policies, even geographic restrictions if you wanted to do that as well. So to really, even if it could be that you're in, pharma, for example, where you need to have data masking for patient records, or if you're in that type of scenarios. So that was short around the new security stuff that's coming in. So that is also now available to set up. It's quite simple. It's not that hard. It doesn't require you to have any Okta integrations or anything along those lines. It will respect whatever you have set up for your Snowflake. So we, for example, use Google as our IDP. So whenever I come in here, I just click on sign in with Google, and then I get routed to my own corporate login provider, and everything is fine and dandy from there. In addition to this, what we also shipped, we've had embeds for quite a while inside of the system. So the ability to take either singular objects or a group of objects, or even a full sheet, and say, yeah, I want to be able to embed this, and then you kind of get like a hyperlink that directly just points to that singular object or group or sheet. And then you can put that inside of an iframe into other systems, or you can paste into Slack and send it to a colleague or whatever you might want to do with it. And that's all great, right? But we've now launched the ability for you to be able to supply filters inside of the URL as well. So that when you send that link to somewhere else, then you can also pass in filters to have some pre-selections applied on top of that. Where this becomes really, really useful is especially when you're embedding it into other types of systems, right? So for example, if you're embedding it into Salesforce, as we've done here, what you can see here is that we have a little tab here showing Astrato content inside of Salesforce. But what's actually happening is that we're taking the contact ID of Aaron Smiling. Yeah, let's pronounce it like that. So we're taking the contact ID of him, and then we're actually passing that down onto a field that exists inside of our Snowflake model, and we're able to filter the data based on that. So instead of having just a kind of having to build one visualization for every account screen inside of Salesforce, which is that won't scale at all, you can just build it once and then apply dynamic filters on top of that to filter those visualizations. And of course, since it's embed, and here we're actually embedding a group, we can also have things like filters and whatnot. So you can almost build this nice little mini UI that is then reacting onto external filters. So works really well inside of ERP systems, CRM systems, you name it. Also works really well if you have something like daily KPIs, where you wanted to apply something like current date or current month or whatever it might be, if you wanted to show some KPIs on your intranet or some portal or whatever it might be. So that is also available now. So inside of Astrato, you will be able to find it if you come into a workbook, and we'll take something like the finance dashboard. And we'll hope my Wi-Fi is with me today. It's been a little bit shoddy. And from here, I can now go in and say, yeah, I wanted to be able to create a embed link. So for example, take this one, and maybe we can say it's for everybody. And now I get this little embed link. And in addition to this, then I can also then apply my filters on top of this embed. And the full structure is then documented as well. And you can select on things that aren't part of the model as well, or part of that specific visualization. So it becomes quite powerful. And yeah, I think that was it for me. We've now run through Piers. We've now run through, let's come in here and get you that nice infinity screen. So I wonder if if it's time for you, Joe, to kind of give your shtick spiel here.
Excellent, thank you, Alex. So I
think you might actually have been the one that created that account screen in Salesforce.
It is, yes.
Yeah. Did you also name him?
The data was already there. I just
okay. Aaron Schmiling. Yeah, I'll remember that one. Yep. I'll shut up now.
We'll put some more difficult names in there for you to pronounce next time.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so what I'm going to go through is a couple of preview features. So everything you've seen so far is already released as part of Astrato today. You can use it right away. What I'm going to touch on is two features that are coming up. That also means I've had to do my little prayers to the demo gods just beforehand, because some of this stuff may change or not be fully ready yet. So what I'm going to show are basically how we can extend some of the data exploration before you start building a dashboard, so that you can really understand if the data you're working with is the right stuff. And then also where we're going with additional measures, which I did see a question pop up in the chat as well. So I think we're going to answer that question as part of this. So first of all, I'm going to go and create a new data view. So data view is the sort of the thinnest layer of essentially metadata we require inside of Astrato to understand what your data looks like. So I'm going to pick an existing Snowflake data connection. And for those who haven't seen how we bring data into our workbooks, this is essentially the flow. So on my left is all of the databases that are in my demo warehouse. I'm going to work with some bike sales data for this demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 3 tables to start with, and then try and explore what's in them. So I'm going to pick my sales table, and I'm also going to take my products table and my customers table as part of that. And once I've picked those tables, I need to define a little bit of logic to say, well, how do these things relate to each other? We have a join suggestions tool in the product, super simple tables in this case, but it'll help me understand how these things might relate, or I can do it manually if I want to, and we help you with a bit of quality suggestions too. So first of all, I'm just going to very quickly prepare my demo with 3 tables with the logical joins that need to go between them. So far I've not had to write any SQL or really understand too much of the data that's there, but I might have been given access to data that I haven't really worked with before, and I want to understand it a little bit more. And I want to do that before I start building a dashboard, because I want that to be quite a quick cycle. So what we're adding in is what we call the Data Explorer. And what this allows me to do is to start looking at the data and maybe adding quick sums and measures without having to start in a dashboard, but also more importantly, without having to write any SQL to do it. So I can expand my sales table, and I can look for, say, my sales amount field, and I can add any fields essentially as a dimension or a measure. In this case, because it's sales amount, I'm going to go with it a sum of sales. So very quickly, with a couple of clicks, I got my total sales, and I might know from a business context whether that sounds about right. And now maybe I want to start breaking that down by a particular dimension. So I'm going to pick my sales territory key value here. And that's great. So it's giving me that ability to break that data down by sales territory, but I might realize now I've got a key value in this table, but I really want the text. That's what I want to actually use in my dashboard. So maybe I'm missing something that I need to add. So let's go back and add in a table. So let's grab the territories table, bring that back into my model. Again, I'm just going to apply that extra join that it needs to link it back to my sales, go back to explore that data. And now I've got my territories table, so I can very quickly maybe add in the country, maybe let's throw in the region as well. And then again, let's just pick that sales amount and do a quick sum of sales. So without having to write any SQL, I can really quickly start to understand the makeup and shape of the data and start thinking about, for the dashboard builder, what would I want to prepare for them, or what extra things might I need? And from here, we can now start defining things for the model. So for example, maybe sales region, I'm pretty sure is going to be a key dimension in my table. So I can maybe tick this and say, well, just add that as a dimension, give it a name and a description, and it'll appear top of the list in any time I'm building dashboards, make it really accessible and visible to users. The great thing with that as well is that those will appear in any workbook that I build on top of this data view. You define them once and they're reused everywhere. If I ever want to get to the query that's behind this, then I can access that as well. So sometimes I might want to take that query and turn it into a table, a custom table in Astrato, or I might want to maybe take that back to my data team and say, I actually want this to be part of my data model. So I just used Astrato as a quick way to structure some SQL without having to write it by hand. So lots of time saving for developers to be able to build that way. So that's Data Explorer. We're adding lots of capabilities to this over the coming couple of months in terms of how you could flip it visually as well. But really fast way to explore data before you start building dashboards. So the final thing then is I want to share the direction we're going in terms of measures in the product. So today you can take any field, you can add it as a dimension or as a aggregation to any visualization in the product. So basic sums and aggregations and averages and so on. Through this view, I'm also able to start using the to create more advanced calculations. So let's start with our sum of sales here, and let's start defining a measure. So what we're introducing now is additional capabilities to allow you to build more advanced measures in the product, but again, without having to write or understand the SQL that's actually being generated behind all of these. So we're adding in a couple of different things. So very simple filtering as the first thing. So maybe I want to look at sales amount, but I want to be specific that I only want to count where the country, where's my country field gone? Find it in somewhere. There we go. Where maybe the country is equal to USA, or that a particular value is positive rather than negative. So you can keep adding additional filters that in the background start to write slightly more complicated SQL that maybe is beyond certain skill levels, or just the speed of writing queries, because I can start applying filters directly into measures. So behind the scenes, there'll be case statements and all sorts of stuff happening, but we make it really, really easy in the UI. So filtering is the first thing that we're adding into measures. And then the final thing after that is then multiple fields in the measure. So let's say that I start off with, I'm just going to clear this one out and start a new one. Got myself in the wrong place. Right.
The demo gods are not abiding.
Demo gods have got me in the wrong place, haven't they? They got me. So let's try again. Okay, right. Why can't I pick my tables? Right. If in doubt, refresh and try again. Okay, let's go again. We will add in our sum of sales as a measure. So we'll start with sum of sales. And then what I'm going to start doing is adding some additional fields into my measure. So let's say I've summed my sales amount, and really what I want to understand is more about margin. So for me to do that, I need to be able to take away the cost value. And I want to do that definition once. Maybe sometimes that might be done in the data warehouse, but some things might not be there. So this is really, how can I add the last mile calculations in a consistent, reliable, and reusable way. So I can start doing that here by maybe taking away the sum of the cost values. So let's look for costs. So the product standard cost, and we would call this one margin. So that lets me take two fields together, but then maybe I really want to get this to a percentage. So I want margin percentage, not just the actual margin in total. So I can keep adding calculations. So let's divide it then by the sum again of the sales amount. And because now I've actually started to write an expression that requires some grouping, so I need to apply the rules of BODMAS for those who remember GCSE or school maths, is I need the first calculation to happen before the second one applies. So essentially what I need to apply is brackets. So if you're writing an expression in Excel, you would probably do this by default. But for us, we just let you do it entirely with the keyboard. So I can group these two expressions together, divide them over the total of the sales amount, and now I've got my margin percentage ready to go. So what I'm able to do is all the typical aggregations are in here. I can filter on every single value that I do. So if you want to do something more complicated, like an NPS calculation, which is really hard to model in a data warehouse without kind of restricting your navigation through the data, you can do that directly through one of these views without having to write any SQL. And of course, if you want to put in numeric values, so say you want to do a percentage without it being a decimal, you can maybe times something by 100. So a really easy way for you to be able to produce metrics and measures without having to go back and write SQL and add those into all of your charts. So this is coming out in the next couple of releases. We'll definitely be looking for lots of feedback from customers as we develop this as well. Okay, so that I think brings us to the end of the feature demos. We've got a couple more bits to talk about in terms of roadmap, in terms of the things that are coming next. And then we'll get on to a little bit of wrap up about some of the challenges and competitions that we're running, and hopefully still have some more time for questions, because I can see a few that have been popping up in the chat as well. So Alex, if you want to hit me onto the next slide. And so ultimately, we are focused in the short term right now in terms of things that you're going to start seeing pretty soon. In terms of authoring workflow, we've spoken a little bit about analytical applications, and to be able to do that, you need to start building actions and logic in your workbooks. So whether it's navigation, whether it's triggering events, we're adding that capability into the product so you can build those more guided experiences. We hopefully will be able to show some of that in our next call as well. License management, again, some capabilities, not the super exciting ones, but the necessary ones. So making it really efficient and easy to manage licenses in the product. On the biz side, expanding our date filtering capabilities, as Piers mentioned, so that you can just very, very easily just look at show me last week type filtering essentially. And then on that data workflow, looking at things like calculated measures, as I've shown, rapid data exploration, custom fields, lots and lots of capabilities we want to add here to make it as easy as possible to work with data. Looking at medium term, looking at theming and versioning for the workbooks, making it really efficient to build workbooks when you're in a larger team. Applying additional access control rules to different types of content, again, really focused on efficiency and security there. In terms of write-back, we're expanding our write-back capabilities to include what we refer to as a writable table. So when you have a table that you're connected to a data model with, be able to inline make changes to content as you're going along. And following up from that, so a capability for the consumers of workbooks is how can you avoid having to have users come back to a BI team to ask for changes to a dashboard. So we're going to leverage what we refer to as self-service exploration capabilities to allow users more freedom to safely explore data, and we've got some pretty smart stuff behind there to make sure they ask logical questions that give them good answers as well. And then finally, we're a SQL generating tool, and so we're going to add support for additional data sources. So Google BigQuery and Dremio are the next two that we're going to add all of the same live query goodness to just to widen the types of sources that we can work with as well. And yeah, continuous improvements in other areas of products, such as our data schema view and the layout. And then as we look into the long term, much of this is driven by feedback that we get from excellent Astrato Galaxy community. Some of the features we've shown today are a direct result of feedback that we've had from our customers. And we'll continue to do that and respond as quickly as we can. Okay, so next slide, just to talk a little bit about some of the other things happening around the Astrato space, and then we'll end the questions. So in terms of competitions and challenges, Alex, if you could just roll on the next slide, please. Thank you. So throughout June, we've been running a challenge called the Good Viz Challenge, focused on encouraging users to build on an environmental and ESG data set. There's still time to be able to do this. It closes today, but you only need a couple of hours to get something really interesting up and out there. There are prizes available for this. You can also check out some of the submissions that we've already seen on the Astrato Galaxy, so please do kind of check that out. Really great way to experience a little bit of the Astrato product as well. We're supplying the data for this as well, so you can just get started with exploring the product. Next one, please. So some of the results from one of our other recent competitions as well. For the Data DNA Challenge, we had a couple of winners from Astrato. So Robert and Tabitha from our Astrato community, building some excellent masterpieces on Forbes billionaires data. I think the picture in the one on the right there is absolutely awesome for that data subject as well. And then final slide, upcoming challenges that we have as well. We'll be supporting a number of competitions, or just ways to explore and learn the product. So some of these are charity focused, others are more general. So we'll be sponsoring some of these events where you can make some creations in Astrato and win some prizes. And please tag Astrato Analytics on LinkedIn for any of these challenges, or again, join Astrato Galaxy, where you can find out lots more. So the right place to come and talk about inspiration and feature requests and all sorts as well. So I think that brings us to the end of the content. So maybe we should just look back through some of the questions that we've had, or if you've not had a chance to ask them yet, then please do throw them out there. Awesome. So we've got a question from Chris Waters. Good to hear you like the right back, but you also say, can you show annotations on charts? Like, I pushed the wrong button. I like that you called me out for that as well, but yes, I have done that many times. So can we do annotations on charts? Piers, do you want to take that in terms of your thoughts on that one?
So that's something on our longer term roadmap. In terms of annotations on charts, directly on charts, no, but you could use our input box and display that in a table to associate the comments with the charts and augment the data, things like that. Yeah.
So one of the things that we've been asked for, and also kind of works quite well with that write back use case, is depends on what you define the annotation or the comment or the process to be. But certainly the writable table concept lends itself well to say, well, here's an entry in a table. Let me apply my comments to say, this risk was assessed by me, or sales look low in this quarter. Different places that we can surface that, but write back certainly is interesting, because then it becomes part of your data rather than just maybe a pinned piece of text on top of a visualization. So yeah, good question. Thanks, Chris.
It's a space to watch, Chris. Thank you for the question.
So another one from Chris as well, which is around, is Astrato hosted on any cloud infrastructure? Can we use things like private links and so on? So today we are a fully SaaS service. So we host and take ownership of all of the management of infrastructure for you. Behind the scenes, we run on Google Cloud, but customers don't need to know or interact with that too much. We do have a number of customers who are interested in that ability to leverage data when it's locked a little bit more behind firewalls and cloud-based infrastructure equivalents of that. So maybe a good opportunity, Chris, if we connect after this, just to see what your setup is, because it's something we're monitoring. We're in a position where we could execute to do it. We just we haven't chosen to do so just yet. But great question. I think it's a really really good one. So
yeah, and worth pointing out, I mean, Astrato only has data in transit. We never have data at rest. So we don't store any data, we don't cache any data. So a lot of the stuff around regulatory purposes, we don't have, it doesn't really come into play. And in the same way, data transfer fees between different cloud providers are also not applicable because we're using the supported way of actually querying data within Snowflake. So that actually does not incur any additional egress fees between cloud providers.
Excellent. Super. Thanks, Alex. I think we had a question around date time as well, in terms of time travel, like how far back it goes, but also the time zone that you're using. So I think it may have been answered in the chat, but we'll cover it anyway. So the time travel feature is essentially a surface through Snowflake, and it allows you to go back 90 days of essentially change state of data within your data warehouse. You do need to be Snowflake Enterprise customer to use it. If Snowflake extend that, then we pick it up, of course, but right now it's 90 days. We just sit on top of that capability from a UI perspective. And in terms of the time zone, so our data models store a time zone, and we are in the process of sort of surfacing that out so you can select which time zone you want your data set to be applicable. And then we'll move on to maybe look at whether we change that by user, but we'll allow more configurability so that you can pick the right time zone for your users or your data set. Right.
So I actually had a question for you, Joe. Right. So I really like the ability to like build advanced measures without having to write in the SQL. Right. So when can I expect that in the product?
So everything I showed was in our dev environments right now. So we're very, very close. We're just connecting everything to our visualizations as well. So hopefully the next one of these sessions, we may have already released it, or we'll be about to in the following couple of days. So certainly our target's going to be in the month of July. So yeah, we'll be able to share it a little bit more soon. But yeah, if anyone's got any feedback and want to connect with us on this one as well, very happy to do so.
So I can safely go on vacation and come back to lots of goodies.
Excellent.
Is that what you're saying? Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your vacations are so long, Alex, then we'll have a whole load more goodies as well.
It'll be a new product.
Awesome. Okay, do we have any other questions? Joe, if you're on, if you can spot any others firing in, then just highlight them on the screen and we can pick them off.
I think Joe's been pretty good with answers. There's lots of thumbs up I can see.
Perfect. Awesome. Right then, well, we'll wrap it up. But if you have any other questions, you want more experience with the product, you want to connect with us for demos, you can sign up for Astrato for free. It's a couple of clicks to get yourself started with the product. Please do so. And Astrato Galaxy is the place where you can connect with all of the Astrato team to find out more as well. But with that, well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.